Did you know that up to 82% of new managers are left completely in the dark, untrained, and searching for answers? That lack of preparation doesn't just hurt your new leaders. It holds your entire business back, draining morale and costing you productivity. Stop the clock on bad management. Golden Mean Consulting offers a proven, no-fluff approach to help your new managers build the right habits from day one. Our co-founders, Sonia and Jason, have over 20 years of experience in the trenches, so you can trust they know what works. To learn more, visit goldenmeanconsultinggroup.com. That's GOLDENMEAN consultinggroup.com.
Wherever you are on your leadership voyage, it starts here.
Hey everybody, welcome to Leadership Voyage, the podcast dedicated to your pursuit of becoming a great leader. I'm your host, Jason Wick, and feel free to reach out to me anytime at startyourvoyage@gmail.com. Before I forget, it's been a few episodes since I've mentioned our affiliate Instacart. If you're looking to get groceries delivered to your doorstep, hand-picked by a shopper, sometimes in as fast as 1 hour, click the link in the show notes to get free delivery on your first order of $35 or more. And by doing that, you support the show. You support Leadership Voyage. We are well over 50 episodes now, talking to lots of guests over the past 4 years. And it's my pleasure and joy in this season 4 to be able to bring more and more wisdom to you all. My guest today is Dominic George. Dominic hails from Oakland, California, currently resides in New Jersey. He went to UC Berkeley and Columbia in New York, and he is a leadership coach for Black men. He helps Black men break through mid-level to get to senior roles. And I had a fantastic conversation with Dominic. He was such a joy to talk to. From the moment we started the call, we were hitting it off very nicely. We were both doing like home improvement projects that same day or something, so it was really easy to get connected. This conversation comes in 2 halves. The first half, we talk about Black men, some of their challenges, opportunities in the workplace, and he is, as I said, a leadership coach for Black men. The second half, we talk about things a little more broadly in terms of career growth, more particularly, and gaps that we can fill with particular approaches and plans on how to close those gaps. So everybody stick around for my fantastic conversation with leadership coach Dominic George. Okay, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Leadership Voyage. I am very happy to be joined by Dominic George today. Nice to see you, Dominic.
It's great to see you as well, and thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. And they say good things come to those who wait. For all you listeners, we started our email thread sometime early in 2024, and by the time this airs, it'll be late 2025. So it took us a year and a half to get going, but it's nice to meet. So thanks for making the time, Dominic.
Absolutely.
Well, this is an exciting topic for me to discuss because it's something I've never had on the show. And this is your wheelhouse, which is you help Black men rise from mid-level in the org chart, in essence, to senior level. And you have a book that you just launched. So we're recording this in July. Just a couple of weeks ago, mid-July, you wrote a book called The Authentic Edge, Leading Without Losing Yourself. And as the work that you do, you self-proclaimed, you want to help Black men rise from mid-level to senior leadership without compromising values, voice, or legacy. So can you tell us what inspired you to start the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I would say for the longest time, I've seen myself in a coaching capacity, whether that was back in my teenage, early adult years when I was swimming or in the swimming world. At some point, I was a coach after I swam through college. And I always found some excitement in just offering people tools and strategies that I've learned along my journey to make it easier for somebody else. And so when I transitioned into the workforce and started my journey in leadership, I started to notice that whenever I would reach out for help, there were always people who would help guide me and direct me in the direction that I needed to go, or wanted to go rather, in terms of getting towards that senior leadership opportunity. And what I noticed in the workplace was there was a lot of individuals, specifically Black men, who weren't getting the same attention, weren't getting the same guidance, or asking the questions needed to really get through some of those obstacles and oftentimes pitfalls. And so when I noticed that trend, alongside other people in the workplace asking me advice and for guidance and direction, I realized that that was a sweet spot for me, that both I enjoyed, people felt comfortable coming to me and asking me those questions. And so as it evolved, I decided I wanted to help as many people as possible. And then that sparked a particular interest in Black men and helping them navigate the corporate ladder.
Love that. And thanks for the backstory. And yeah, as we were getting to know each other a little bit before the record button, as you said here, Dominic, for all the listeners, Dominic was a swimmer at UC Berkeley. Also, I believe you went to Columbia in New York as well for some extra education too, right? And it's great to hear that backstory about how you saw yourself kind of as a coach or in supporting roles in different contexts, and then kind of connecting these dots in corporate America with some of what you were seeing with Black men. What are some of the most common leadership struggles that you see, particularly among mid-level Black men who are looking to get to that next level? What are some of the most common leadership struggles that you see?
Yeah, one of the biggest struggles that I see, and it's such a great question, one of the biggest struggles I see is often we've been told in the workplace to sort of put your head down, do the work, focus on your work stream, and the results will lead to the opportunities. And what I often find is, yes, you will get the praise and the results that you're looking for in terms of execution and progress forward, where you're focused on your individual work stream. But a common pitfall that I see, an obstacle in the workplace, is not prioritizing cross-departmental relationships. And something that I often teach when I'm coaching other Black men at the mid-level is to really understand both the dynamic of your organization, understanding what is the mission and the vision of the organization, because that's going to be your anchor and foundation. And then also understand who are the other leaders alongside of you, whether that's your peers, whether that's upward, other leaders in the company in different departments. Like, what are their individual work streams? What are understanding what they're working on, so that as you evolve and grow, that you get to collaborate and create those win-wins across departments, so that the organization wins, your colleagues win, and you ultimately win in the long run when you're progressing towards that senior leadership opportunity. But I see the biggest pitfall is just people putting their head down and only focusing on their work versus building those cross-functional relationships.
Yeah, thanks for that answer. So most commonly, you're seeing folks who are just kind of keeping their head down, doing their job, minding their own business. And your advice, if I'm hearing you right, is to put your head up, look around, broaden, connect with others in other departments, understand your company's vision and mission, where it's going, and make those connections and use that as an anchor for moving forward.
Yeah, certainly as the starting point. There's more nuanced ways in which I see individuals sort of walking into pitfalls, but I would say that that's the first step that every aspiring leader should take, is to figure out who's in your organization and what's their why behind the work that they do.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you know the real reason half your employees are looking to leave? Untrained first-time managers. You need a way to stop the bleeding, the expensive cycle of disengagement and turnover. It's time to flip the script from surviving to thriving. Let's equip your leaders to build engaged, loyal, and profitable teams. Sign your leaders up for our 6-week new manager bootcamp, a hands-on, accelerated program to grow and learn with like-minded peers, augmented by personalized coaching sessions. No theory, just simple tools that Golden Mean Consulting co-founders Sonia and Jason have used for over 20 years. Ready to invest in your team's success? Secure your spot now at goldenmeanconsultinggroup.com/services. That's GOLDENMEAN consultinggroup.com/services.
So that's one of the most common struggles you've mentioned. I mean, what are some of the obstacles, do you think, that are in the way of Black men from rising the ranks?
Yeah, one of the obstacles that I see is there's just not enough sponsors in the workplace to support Black men in elevating their work streams, elevating their results, and impact throughout the organization and rooms that they're not present to. And um, yeah, there's just not enough sponsors to be able to offer that both guidance in the moment and speak the value of their work in other rooms that they're not present to. And also there's just not enough coaches and mentors to be able to guide Black men in those spaces. I would say that that's the biggest obstacle, is finding that support within the workplace.
Yeah, thank you for that. I have a small business, consulting business, and the co-founder, a female, she had a keynote this week. Again, this is being recorded in July, and the title of her keynote was called "Being the Only," and it was about women mostly in rooms where there aren't many of them, and rather than kind of suppressing your voice, making it embracing that it's unique. And she gave a keynote about this week, and it kind of reminds me of that. I think something I've heard along the way that that's in my mind right now is sometimes it's hard to see yourself in a role if you don't see others who look like you or are like you in that role. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it shows up in so many workplaces already in the dynamic. I can speak from my own experience and reference some of the individuals who I've coached over my within my coaching practice. For me, I've often been the only one in many rooms, whether that's starting in the swim world, where it's predominantly not that many African Americans within the sport in general. And then when you get to the elite spaces, there's very few far in between. And so that was actually one of my anchors and foundation of why I wanted to both continue, be great, and have fun at something that I was already loving, is because I wanted to create a space where other young Black boys, other Black children got to see a swimmer at an elite level, so that they could aspire to be something greater. Because often when you see yourself in a room, you could dream of how to become that person or how to be better than that individual. So that was the swimming world. In the workplace, similar thread. Going to UC Berkeley, again, the population of Black males were very small and few in between. And we certainly connected because community is important in those spaces. Similar at Columbia, similar experience, similar in the workplace. And so these sort of trends happen, and it certainly makes the obstacle to get to where you want to go a little bit harder if you can't see a window and an opportunity in the door to get there through the reflection of somebody else already been present. Not impossible, but it certainly makes the climb a little bit harder.
Yeah, a little additional challenge that you're calling out there for some. We mentioned earlier, you've got this new book, The Authentic Edge: Leading Without Losing Yourself, and you yourself have a podcast and a business called Vision Leadership for Life. And when you work with African American men about and are mentoring them, coaching them, how do you help connect them with mentors or others in their lives who can maybe show them what it looks like to walk through that door?
Yeah, and also a great question. Again, community is such a foundation in how we move through the world. And it doesn't matter what your identity is, right? We all need someone in a space to help guide, direct, call us out, call us forward, call us in to different opportunities of elevating ourselves. And so when I'm coaching other Black men, specifically in the professional space, something that I start with is oftentimes people don't see the value within their own community, and they don't see, maybe there's someone in your life who have had an experience but just haven't shared it because people are often busy and they go on and live their life without acknowledging or celebrating their wins. And so sometimes you have to actually inquire about who's done this before, who's been in this space, and that's when you start to realize that the power of your own network. So I often encourage the individuals that I'm working with to start with their individual network first, but then there's the professional spaces where I like to say, and something I've learned in my own personal and professional development is this concept that you don't know what you don't know until you don't know it. And the idea is that in the professional world, there are groups of Black men who are looking to both elevate themselves, but also elevate others through teaching, through coaching, through guidance of mentorship, being a sponsor, like all the things that you need to elevate. And the second thing that I walk other Black men through when they're working towards moving from mid-level management into senior level management is to tap into some of those resources. Sometimes that's at conferences. Sometimes that's listening to a podcast. Sometimes that's just through a referral to connect with someone else in your industry in order to elevate. But there's so many ways to do it. But starting with your own network and then branching out to those networks that are unavailable, or you're just not clear that they're there yet.
Great answer. And thanks for the multifaceted response to that. I think that's very helpful. Man, when we talk about sometimes things are right under our own noses, I love the way that you call that out. We have different communities, different identities with different communities. And in this case, maybe some of the people you already know are holding positions or have accomplishments or have done things you're not aware of, and maybe you have to dig a little deeper into some of the folks that you already do know. Love that. And then the professional side, talking about introductions, referrals, conferences, podcasts. I guess when I think about it, now that you're saying it, there are just so many resources out there, and maybe somebody needs a little direction too. But I love the angle on both of those. Talking about the workplace, it's 2025, and I never talk political on this show. But sometimes it just tangentially gets involved. So, in this era right now, compared to a year ago when we first started emailing, there's kind of this almost anti-woke sentiment that's emerged, and it brings up the idea of DEI in the workplace. And I talked to someone a couple of years ago about how to work with people different from you. That was the title of her book. And it was a very interesting and important conversation. I would love to get your take as someone who's working with Black men, and we've just talked about a lot of times they're the only in the room, right? What are practical steps that organizations can take to support Black men, like actually support Black men outside of kind of token moves?
Yeah, and thank you for the question as well. Certainly, the space in which we're in currently is definitely dramatically different than what it was a year ago, even a couple of months ago. Yep. And as the world changes, we get to change with it. And I always think that, or at least my guiding principle is, whatever space I walk into, I want to make it that much better so that the next person gets to just grow a little bit easier. And if I've done that, I feel like I've done my job in that space. And so when I think about what organizations can do to really elevate the opportunities of other Black men in the room, something you said earlier, right, around the keynote speech around women oftentimes being the only one in the room. It's a relatable experience, sometimes a little different, but certainly relatable and overlap. Oftentimes what I see when Black men are the only one in spaces is that they tend to have the pressure to represent all versus just live in their own identity, figuring out their own identity and leadership, figuring out who they are as a leader, and then elevating from that space. And so in those spaces where maybe there's a smaller number of Black men within your organization, my first offer is to look at your HR department and your hiring trends to figure out, why is there only a few Black men within your organization, and really question, what are my hiring practices? What type of environment do I want to create? Is it an inclusive experience, or is it exclusive? And then what's the target population that you're working with? Like, consider all of those things that relate back to your mission and your vision, and then question, is your hiring practices actually supporting you in that mission and vision? I would say that that's the first step. If there's a few Black men within the organization, for those that are already in the organization, I always highly emphasize professional development. Again, what I learned is, you don't know what you don't know until you don't know it. And the lived experiences of anyone's identity is different from the person across from you, and there's some relatable experiences. But often for Black men, we get to both infuse our culture in our leadership, and we also get to infuse the organizational values and how we move forward. And something that I offer for organizations, if you want to improve the experience of Black men within those spaces, is to offer them, especially if they're on the track towards senior leadership, offer them the executive coaching, both internal and external, as an option, so that they get to choose what works best for them in their own leadership journey, as well as depending on how your professional development department is laid out within your organization, whether you have an LMS system or you actually do trainings where you go in and you coach your leaders on how to develop. I would encourage you to bring people from the external world into those spaces who are experts, and make that diversify that those resources, so that you get to see different perspectives of how to lead a little bit differently. Those are a couple of ways that organizations could push forward, but there's so many that I feel like we could talk about that all day.
No, good answer. Thank you. And some good tangible advice for organizations looking within HR, providing and what their mission, what their goals are, what their hiring practices reflect, providing professional development for Black men when they have an opportunity, either internal or external opportunities for professional development with executive coaching. Love all these ideas and others. Thanks for taking that question head on, Dominic. So I wanted to take this conversation in general and turn it into kind of two halves. And the first is kind of focused on Black men and your wheelhouse and how you help others. And then kind of something that is hopefully a little broader for all professionals. And we wanted to focus on career growth with some questions here. And this will apply to, of course, Black men that you work with and with anyone else, hopefully, in the workforce too. So I was listening to one of your most recent podcast episodes this morning, actually, and it was about communication. And I thought I'd spring this one on you. I really, really liked this topic. What is the cost if someone hasn't developed their communication and they possess poor communication skills?
Yeah, the cost is ultimately you lose people. I think that's the foundation. If you can't communicate clearly, you lose people in both the messaging and then also just the motivation to move forward with you. There's a lot more in that podcast, but I think if I had to sum it up in a short sentence, I would say that is what it is. You lose people as a result. And oftentimes people actually just don't realize that they are either poor communicators or what they're trying to communicate is not being received by the person across for them. And something that I often coach when I'm coaching leaders in terms of communication and addressing poor communication is to understand that you're not communicating for yourself, you're actually communicating for the person across from you. And so that takes a little bit of nuance, a little bit of emotional intelligence, a little bit of leadership awareness to understand, how does that person across from you like to be spoken to? How does that person learn? And there's many ways to understand individual learning styles, but understand how that individual learns and what are their buttons, like what are their pressure points when you push them a little bit too far in your communication or a little bit too little, like how do they respond? I think in essence, if you're a poor communicator, you're going to lose that person across from you, but there's so many ways to confirm that you're both hearing each other and delivering the message that you are intending to deliver.
Something I'm big on personally is practice. And what I also heard you say in that episode were some really interesting, just tangible things a person could do to almost audit themselves on how they communicate. And for myself, I went to college for music. I was a professional musician. And something that you do as a musician is you record yourself. You listen to how you sound. Maybe there's a bias in your brain as you play that makes you think that this note was in tune or this note was in time. And I loved something that you added about how to kind of check yourself on how you sound when you speak was to record yourself and also to ask others for advice about how they hear you in the room.
Yeah, and it's a line that you get to negotiate, right? In leadership, there's can be a scarcity of time or there can be an abundance of time. But what I love is that when you practice, and I love that that's your philosophy as well, when you practice, you get to improve, and the people around you also get to improve in that process. Um, yeah, of course, I have my own podcast. I'm often listening to myself. I'm often in like spaces where I get to reflect on something that I said. And what I love about leadership is you're always going to get the feedback if you create the space where people feel welcome to give you that feedback. But what I love about the leadership space is you can create feedback in so many different ways. Um, and yes, I encourage people to practice as well. Often when I'm working with leaders, and I talk about this in my book as well, is I was working with an individual who I encouraged to record a meeting with themselves, or not with themselves, with their team, of course, with permission. And the intention was to understand their body language, because communication is not just verbal. There's also the silent communication of body language and how you're perceived by others. And so I worked with individuals where I've encouraged them to record themselves in a meeting, to both understand how are they showing up in presence, and then how is their audio and their voice being perceived and received from others. And it's just an opportunity where you get to practice. Something I learned when I was in the education space is teachers do this all the time. Like they have an expectation, and everybody does it a little different, but there's an expectation to record yourself teaching to your class. And that is used to elevate your own development and offer you skills and tips and techniques to improve, because ultimately the goal is for the students in that classroom to really receive the information and own it themselves and go off and do great things with it. Similar in leadership, when you're offering guidance and you're elevating your company through results and execution, as well as intentionally supporting other people in their growth. The intention is to communicate in a way where they get it and they could run with the idea and create something better. So I often, similarly, I focus on practice as well.
Love the addition of the video recording of a manager with their team meeting. I hadn't even really thought about that angle, but you're right. I mean, so much of communication is nonverbal, especially now that we're back in rooms together
Mhm.
post-COVID. And,
Yes.
I mean, quiet team member in the corner speaks up unexpectedly and you recoil or something as a manager, right? You don't even know what you're doing, perhaps. I love that angle. And thanks for bringing the educational aspect, teachers and education into this as well. I guess it's incidentally related, but I was going to ask, you know, when we're talking about gaps in our own skills, like acknowledging that we have a gap and we need to grow that, and it's crucial to close that gap in order to grow. Do you have other tips outside of what we've been talking about, recording yourself for communicating and other ideas here? How can you identify your own knowledge gaps?
Actually, I'll start with myself, right? So I am committed to being a lifelong learner. Like no matter where I'm at in life, I want to continue to learn. And um, there's an intentional pathway to like just grow and develop. And I think as an individual, if you want to be a better leader, if you want to be a better communicator, if you want to be a person who is better at execution, like whatever the thing is, there has to be an intentional desire to want to grow and develop. And so I would say that that's the first step. If you get into that mindset, where you actually want to grow and develop and learn, then I would say that the next step is to ask for feedback. Like that is the clearest way to understand how you're leading, and it's not always your team member, right? So there's 360 evaluations, where you get access to a number of different people. It doesn't have to be just in the workplace, but it's people you're closest to, people who you're not close to but have had some level of an interaction with you, to get that feedback. And that could be the first indicator of some potential opportunities to grow in. I would say that that's an example of things you may not know that you don't know, but you get to grow in after you receive the information. And then there's other things where you just know for yourself. As a introvert who goes into spaces and practice being an extrovert in many different spaces, I've learned how to show up in those spaces as an extrovert, because when you're given a keynote and you're talking to a number of people in a crowd or at a fundraiser, like, you can't be an introvert in those spaces, even though that's my comfort level. But I've learned over my leadership journey that I have to be the person speaking up in the room, it depends on the context of the room. But in general, I've learned as a leader that I have to be the person both listening and speaking up when appropriate. And that was just an internal thing that I had already knew about myself. And so for the leaders out there who are looking to grow and develop, there are things about yourself that you just already know. You know that there are both blind spots that you have. There are points of opportunity for improvement that you're already aware of, whether you got the feedback or not. You just internally know. And that's just an invitation and an opportunity to go out and seek the resource, right? That could be through coaching, that could be through reading, that could be through podcasts. There's so many different ways where you could explore that lesson to get the resource. But the first step is to actually just take the step.
Love it. Thank you. And it seems that action, being action oriented is always going to help. So I love that. Taking your destiny in your own hands. And of course, you said sometimes we look around, we go, well, I already know I'm falling short. What am I going to do about that? But helping others asking others, that helps address your blind spots too. And I love that angle. Thank you. Also, really appreciate the introvert plug. I'm always a fan when somebody talks about being introverted. For the listeners, remember, if you're into introversion, leaders specifically as introverts, Terrence Lee, the introvert leader, he's been on a couple times. Scroll back and find that podcast after this one. Okay, one more question about career growth for you, Dominic. You've got this thing called strategic career mapping. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? What is it, and how can it help anyone who's in their mid-level in their career, who is looking to find the right opportunity? What is it? How does it work?
Yeah, and you could definitely go a lot more in depth in my book, which again is The Authentic Edge: Leading Without Losing Yourself, for more clear examples. But strategic mapping, when I think of that, I think of in order to get to a result, you have to have a clear destination. And if you don't have a clear destination of what the end result is going to be, you'll always be lost. You'll always be on the road that maybe leads you to a detour. And so when I coach around strategic mapping, I'm often encouraging young leaders to just identify, where do you want to be in your leadership journey? Whether that's a title, whether that's a specific role, whether that's an emotional feeling when you're leading, or if that's just, I want to be the best at X thing. You have to get very clear on what that thing is first. And that then offers you the roadmap to figure out, how do you map forward to get there? And depending on the goal itself, like, there's so many different strategies to get there. But when I think about the strategic mapping, it's understanding where you need to go in order to get there. And then once you know that destination, then it's about creating the relationships to actually bridge the gap from where you are to where you need to be, alongside some of the skill sets that ultimately needs to be developed. Something that I coach to in my own coaching practice is the 3 M's. So there's mindset, there's mastery, and then there's motivate. Oftentimes I spend a lot of time on individual mindset, and that usually impacts how someone gets to their goal or even identifies their goal, is how you think about yourself as a leader and how you show up as a leader. What is that mindset of how you're talking to yourself when nobody else is looking? And once you sort of master the mindset of who you are, your own identity, and how you show up as a leader, then you can start to master some of the soft skills and the hard skills that really get you to that leadership elevation of that strategic map. And then ultimately the goal is, once you're in those spaces, you get to motivate others to grow and inspire to be better than where you are.
Love it. 3Ms, mindset, mastery, motivate. Great stuff. And as you said, for folks who want to learn a little bit more in depth, they can find the book on Amazon and elsewhere. And we'll get to that in just a minute. Thanks for addressing that question, Dominic. Before we give you a chance to let everybody know how they can connect with you or where you'd like to direct them, I ask every guest on this show the same question at the very end. And that is, what is something that you've learned recently?
You get to be whoever you want to be. And maybe that's not a recent development, but I think in my stage of leadership and goal setting and where I want to be, you could always rebrand. You could always repivot to be who you want to be in the moment. And you're not tied down to whoever you were yesterday, whoever you were an hour ago. You get to actually sit in the moment and decide, who do you want to be? And so I often think about just being able to rebrand. This came through a lesson of moving across country. Earlier, I talked about, or you talked about my education, being from Oakland, California, went to UC Berkeley. And then at some point years later, I decided I'm going to up and move to a different state where I knew no one. But I just decided I was just going to go and take the risk and bet on myself that I was going to be extraordinary in that place because all the evidence told me that I was already great in California. So my mindset was, if I could do it in one place, I can do it in the next. And that really taught me that through that time that you could really recreate yourself. And so the lesson that I've learned, maybe relearned again, is that you get to rebrand yourself wherever you are in life. And your only limitation in that process.
I love it. Thank you. And it's a great message of positivity. And honestly, there are a lot of folks in the knowledge worker space, particularly right now with the layoffs and challenging job markets. I'm sure a lot of people are wondering some of that same thing. Man, am I too far in my career to do anything different? Do I have to do the same thing? And I love it because it goes back to your 3Ms, perhaps in a different context, mindset, right? Your mindset is what determines that. You can do that. You can rebrand. Thank you for that encouraging word, Dominic. For folks who are into what we're talking about today, want to learn a little bit more, connect with you, where would you like them to go?
Yeah, so the best place to reach me is via LinkedIn. My LinkedIn handle is Dominic C. George. And I'm the person messaging back and forth there. It may take me a little bit of time to get back to you, but I'm always committed to communicating with everybody that I come in contact with when I can. And so that's the first place. You could discover my podcast there, Vision Leadership for Life. You could also discover my newsletter, which I send out on a weekly basis to offer strategies and tips and tools for the aspiring leader who wants to go into senior leadership. And then there's also an opportunity to book on my calendar directly there if you want to have an individual meeting around executive coaching, or if you want to elevate your organization and create opportunities where you get to thrive alongside other employees within your organization. That's an opportunity to do that as well. And then finally, if you just want to reach out to me directly, you could email me at admin@visionleadershipforlife.com, and I will respond to your email.
Great. And we'll have all that in the show notes for anybody who wants to click. So thank you for that quick summary. Dominic George, really nice talking to you today. And earlier, something you said was that I think you said your guiding principle is that whatever space you walk into to just make that a little bit better. I think you've accomplished that today with me. And thank you so much for your humility, your wisdom, and for sharing your time with us above all. And it's been nice to talk to you a little bit today.
So grateful to be here, and thank you for having me. Although it took a year, I'm glad we actually were able to have the conversation, and to many more.
There you have it, everybody. Dominic George on Leadership Voyage. Thanks for sticking around for the entire conversation. I hope you got a lot out of it. I certainly did. I learned a lot about some of the challenges facing Black men in the mid-level, and also a lot about growth, some good conversations about practice and elsewhere, and otherwise, which for those of you who listen regularly shouldn't be too surprised by some of those topics. All right, so before I move forward, or another reminder, Instacart. If you want to support the show and get a free delivery to your doorstep, on any order, $35 or more. Click that link. Okay, so here are your show notes and episode recap for today with Dominic George. Black men's biggest corporate struggles are being told to keep your head down and do your work has generally been the biggest pitfall, but they need to prioritize cross-departmental relationships, understanding the mission and vision of the organization, and learn the work streams of others in the org to collaborate and create win-wins. Black men's biggest obstacles have been not enough sponsors in the workplace, not enough coaches and mentors within the workplace, and often you might be the only African American in the room. When you see yourself in a room, you're more likely to imagine yourself in that role. Black men connect with mentorship and support. They can do this by looking to their own personal network. Sometimes you underestimate maybe who you already know and don't realize what they've accomplished or what they're up to. Also, there are conferences, podcasts, referrals, of course. Let's see. For organizations serious about DEI, what steps could they actually do to support Black men? Well, when Black men are seen as the only in a space, first of all, they tend to feel pressure to represent all Black men rather than just themselves. So keeping that in mind, when there are a few Black men in the organization, look to HR and ask why there are so few, and then question the hiring practices and how they serve the mission. Ask yourself what you want to be as an organization. An important professional development opportunity that Dominic called out is providing executive coaching opportunities for Black men. Then we talked about growth in general here, and if you don't communicate effectively, you'll lose people as a result. Often people don't understand or realize that they're poor communicators or that their communication isn't being received. Remember, you're communicating for the person across from you. It takes emotional intelligence to nail that. And when you practice, for example, recording a meeting, you and those around you get to improve. In order to identify your own knowledge gaps, embrace the philosophy. Thank you, Jason. Embrace the philosophy that you can be a lifelong learner. Have an intentional desire to grow and develop. Ask for feedback, team members, 360 review, whatever that looks like. Also, you know objectively that you don't cut it in some areas, so acknowledge those and come to grips with that. Find the resources to improve, coaching, reading, podcasts, or otherwise. Strategic career mapping starts with identifying where you want to go, and then when you know the destination, create the relationships to get you there and develop the skill sets. There's more about this in Dominic's book, which there's a link to in the show notes. But 3 M's are what are important here: mindset, mastery, and motivate. And when I asked Dominic something he had learned recently, it fit perfectly into this because he said, you can always be whoever you want to be. You can rebrand, sit in the moment, and you don't have to be who you were an hour ago. I thought that was really refreshing to think about, and it fits perfectly with growth. So that's your episode recap for my conversation with Dominic George. Until next time, everybody take care.